Look, thank you, Brandon, for pulling us together at such a brilliant location and pulling together a superb panel. Your timing isn't fabulous, but it is great to be here. I've been here in New York now for a couple of weeks, and I've lost count of the amount of times that people have said to me, how surreal is it to be here in New York to watch cricket in, perhaps the most iconic city in the world. But we're here. We've got the men's ICC T20 World Cup happening 30 kilometers east of here, and of course in Dallas and down in Florida as well. We've built an entirely pop-up modular stadium for 34,000 people as we look to make a bit of a splash in the world's biggest sports market. Have they started batting yet?
No.
No? Okay,
Don't
good.
worry.
Thank you.
I will interrupt whoever's
I can't focus.
talking.
This is going to be dreadful until this is over. All part of ICC's long-term strategy to build the game into new markets. And this session is about cricket as a global sport and the opportunity for us to explore the importance of new markets for all of us, the drivers, the strategies, the challenges and learnings that were experienced as we look to expand our sport beyond our core markets and learn from colleagues who've been there. It feels a bit, for me, like I'm getting a masterclass here with these guys in terms of international expansion. They're way ahead of where we were. Both NBA and NFL started their expansions sort of 40 plus years ago and have got to where they've got to today. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we will take some questions from the floor later, but I've got a few of my own first. Firstly, about the cricket.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Okay, good. So before we start, I'd like to get each of you to introduce yourselves and a little bit about you, your role, what you do, and what your objectives are. Gerrit, can I start with you, please?
Sure. Are we on?
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Never thought I'd see myself on a cricket stage, but this is very, very exciting. So I oversee the NFL and everything that we do from a business perspective outside of the US as head of international. What the role is really focused on is to see how we can be supportive in growing the game of football in general around the world. So a lot of times the conversation goes very quickly to, oh, that's the London games or that's the Munich game. Obviously that has high visibility and that's a big focus for what we do, but it goes much deeper than that. So for us, it is very important that we can drive participation around the world, that we see more young players, boys and girls, engaging in specifically flag football, that they show an interest in the game, that we can provide education around the game, so that it eventually leads to just more fandom around the world, that we get more fans who love the game, who love attending the game, viewing the game, engaging with the game, whether that means coming and attending any of our regular season games that we have abroad. That could be one thing, but for us it is about growing the overall game of football in general, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about, the challenges that we're facing in doing that, given that that American football is really only number one in one country, and that is like right now here in the United States.
Great, thank you. Amy?
Thank you. Do we need a check? I don't want to...
Nothing.
You
don't.
will tell
I will
us.
Interrupt whatever anybody's saying to tell you what's happening.
I'm very
Don't
impressed you all are paying attention during this time. Thank you. So Amy Brooks with the NBA. I've been at the NBA 20 years. Most of the time, my career has been spent running our team marketing and business operations group here in the United States, working with our teams. But I have a new role this year overseeing new business ventures. And what that means is heavily, as you heard Gerrit say, how can we bring basketball and new basketball businesses globally? We're already a major global sport, but how can we really inspire kids, like you heard in the last panel, both not just kids, but deepening engagement around basketball and also creating new fans around the globe, and also spending time on what new products and services can the NBA create. We this year just launched a new basketball property, our in-season tournament. It was new. It was something, those of you very familiar with European soccer and soccer around the globe, it's very common to have an in-season tournament, and it wasn't here. And so we're just looking for new opportunities like that. And it's really a pleasure to be here. We brought a game to India in 2019, and I was there in Mumbai and just saw firsthand the popularity of cricket as a sport there. And it's really, really remarkable.
Great.
And we have a game tonight. I should mention the NBA Finals start tonight for those of you willing to watch.
We'll watch. Satyan.
Hi, I'm Satyan. I'm from the Times of India group, and I oversee pretty much everything we do in sports. Broadly, we, for better or for worse, we stumbled into cricket, let's say maybe 15 years ago, when we bought the digital rights for the IPL in India, as well as the international rights. And in doing that, we really got a lot of exposure to the sport. Through that, we ended up acquiring two companies that some of you will know today. One of them is Willow TV, and the other is CricBuzz. And so today, CricBuzz is kind of the largest platform for news and scores and sort of alerts around cricket. It's in India today, the term CricBuzz is searched more than the term cricket now. And then Willow TV is the largest broadcaster of cricket in North America between the US and Canada. It distributes direct to consumer, but more so in terms of partnerships with cable and satellite companies. Our biggest partner is right there is Liz, who's from Dish and Sling, who's been a long, long time partner with Willow for almost maybe 20 years, something like that. And so, and then the third part of it is that, I helped sort of co-found Major League Cricket, which Vijay will talk to you a little bit about more later, which is really about building local and experiential cricket in America. And so, to be honest, when we think about our international goals, it started as sort of an extension of the Indian audiences that we serve in India and America. But increasingly, we feel like, the momentum and potential for cricket, over decades to be relevant, not just for South Asians, but for a broader audience is really exciting. And we feel like we can do everything we can to support it. So like one of the things, I should stop talking. You can ask questions. Has anything happened yet? Nothing's happened yet.
Focus.
Yeah.
You're all market leaders in your core markets, and all brands that we look to and we aspire to be like as we as a sport are looking to expand outwards. What has driven the expansion in your sports beyond those core markets? Amy, if I could start with you, please.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate, as I mentioned to you earlier, 75% of the NBA's live telecast consumption is outside the U.S., and it wasn't always that way, and it becomes a big prioritization exercise of where should you invest. And commonly, we have invested in markets that kids are growing up playing basketball. Our China business has been very successful. Basketball has been a sport for decades and decades and decades there. But now we're very focused on how can we create, just like it's happening here.
Interruption.
Oh, yes, please.
Dot ball, first dot.
Do we clap? Do we clap? Okay.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
It's good. Okay. Back to what I was saying. Anyway, we're very focused on, just like Major League Cricket is doing here, wherever a kid is growing up playing a certain sport, they want to aspire and they want to see a path to play that sport locally. And the NBA, for example, 450 players, it's a big leap for someone. Go ahead.
I feel terrible, but
please.
It was a 4.
Here.
So,
okay.
So that's not good.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm continuing on. Interrupt me. It's a big leap. For example, I just came back from Rwanda, Africa. We have a Basketball Africa League. We had the finals there last week. A great example of a property we've built where it's a big leap for kids growing up in Africa to believe that they can keep practicing and then play in the NBA. And this provides that middle ground. So it's both talent development and business development there. Did I get anything else?
No.
We're good? Okay.
Gerrit, what about you? What's driven that expansion? You touched on it a little bit in your introduction about taking NFL beyond its, where it's number one. What's driven that?
So I think for us, the objectives have evolved and changed a little bit. I think the difference with football versus, for example, basketball is actually a game that is being played in a lot of the various markets around the world, while football is not really. So I think for American football has really become a function from a little bit of exhibition awareness, but then kind of coming back, focusing on very select markets, very few. If you kind of look at the last 20, 30 years, from an NFL perspective, very active Canada, Mexico, that makes a lot of sense. That's North America, that's the same time zone. Then you go to the UK, that kind of makes sense, right? English speaking, a lot of that. But then it kind of stopped. Everything else was very opportunistic over the years. And I think for us, a number of things that have kind of changed. First of all, digital, so dissemination of just content, availability of content. And then...
Sorry, I have to interrupt. There's been a wicket.
So we had a dot, a 4, a wide, and a wicket.
Okay, all right. And just keep going.
This is the worst. This is the worst
keep your
job
thought,
ever.
Just keep your thought on that. Much easier to kind of get content out and get interest. The second thing is just people move around a lot more. So the awareness, the interest, the cultural relevance that is being created around sports in general, and I don't just mean football, it enjoys a much greater awareness. And so the globalization of sports in general has provided interest of what it could be. And I think that's what it started for us. What could it be? We talk about the opportunity, but you don't really know what it is because, you can't just say it's domestic and then it's the rest of the world, right? The world is a big place. There's a lot of countries, so we're looking country to country. And some we have great established fan base already for various and different reasons. They provide us with a very different opportunity than going into a market that maybe doesn't have any fandom at all. So for us, we're just kind of going through exploring right now what the opportunity is market by market, and then slowly getting ourselves involved with that market to, where we can create relevance for the sport, the engagement, and then everything else that comes with it.
Just something came to mind with this game.
Terrible.
Any updates before I make the comment?
They're reviewing the wicket.
Okay, they're reviewing a wicket. If this game were happening during the Olympics, and maybe it will, right? What an opportunity to galvanize the country here around cricket. And it's such an opportunity. This is the first time you said cricket's in the Olympics since?
28 is going to be the first time. Yeah.
28, yeah. Second time since 1900?
1900, yeah.
And just as a parallel, for those of you old like me, 1992, the U.S. Dream Team. So this is the first time professional NBA players win the Olympics. In 1992, the NBA had 19 international players. Today we have 140, and we really do credit. There's a lot of things we've done, but we credit that exposure in the Olympics to players around the globe wanting to play basketball more and wanting to play in the NBA. So I just draw the parallel to cricket. What a fantastic exposure platform the Olympics is going to provide.
And maybe to add to that, because also in 2028, flag football has been added, right?
That's right.
So this is the first time that football goes on a global stage, so drives participation. But then actually the additional point you made is we're just seeing a lot more interest from athletes, not even football athletes, rugby athletes coming from different other sports, having an interest in football to play. And so for us to also provide them a pathway back, I don't think this is going to be exclusively the objective there, but we're seeing, Louis Ray Samet, who came out of rugby, deciding to play football. Those are stories we're seeing more and more. John Malata coming out of rugby in Australia. So we're seeing more and more players, even players who've never played football ever before. So we want to create a path for them as well on every level to play football on the highest level, basically.
The wicket was reviewed. It was out. Yeah.
Very good.
And just to comment on, I love what the NFL is doing with flag, because on the last panel, Sanjog mentioned legacy sports are often hesitant to change. This is just how we play. And flag football has obviously been a thing for a long time, but look at how broadly this opens up flag football to women, to others, and it's just, I think it's great. And to your point, the Olympics is going to be a great opportunity for you too.
Yeah, I think the flag football product is so much more accessible than what we see from an NFL perspective to grow the game. And it's, like you say, the Olympic opportunity is so exciting for both NFL and for cricket. And that was the point of us pursuing Olympic inclusion. Satyan, dare I come to you with a question? Well, you can interrupt yourself.
Give him a hard question.
Wait, just wait.
Give him a very complicated question, please.
Wide ball.
Wide.
The worst thing they could do here. Yes, wide.
Never mind.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, Gerrit talked about digital there. You're obviously the largest digital platform, part of the largest media organization in the world's most populated country, and you're exporting yourself out here to the USA. Talk to us a little bit about that. You mentioned Major League Cricket and how important a role that will play. We're on day one with the ICC Men's T20 World Cup. We're about to enter into season 2 of Major League Cricket. We've got LA 2028, and you can start to see the growth over the longer period of time of the sport in this country. What's driven it for you?
First of all, a 4. So our story is really interesting. Obviously, our focus and our primary market is India. We have, on our digital platforms, we reach maybe 500 million monthly users in India. But the reality is that if you're a first-generation Indian living abroad, Your primary destination usually for news is the Times of India's website. And I think what we saw when we started getting exposed to cricket rights was that cricket is, we think of ourselves as a consumer company and a consumer media company, and news is one of the core needs, but without a doubt, for Indians globally, sport and cricket in particular is, and that's where we got attracted to and entered the opportunity. We've learned a lot in this process. What I think is interesting is, I would say, admittedly, that our goal initially when we bought Willow was to just serve the Indian American population and maybe the South Asian American population better and provide more services. But the goal has expanded so much beyond that. And so today, if you ask the Willow team, the main question we're asking ourselves is, okay, everyone who loves cricket watches Willow, whether it be through a cable satellite provider or direct or whatever it may be. Everyone watches Willow. But what about everyone else? And so we're really focusing a lot on what are the things we can do to help just expand the audience. So for example, this World Cup right now, on some of the cable satellite partners, even if you don't subscribe to Willow, you can watch it for free for the first week of the World Cup. And these are ways that we're going to try to sample. With Major League Cricket, we're talking about ways in which, let's say the New York team is playing, there are New York-specific TV channels. Can we broadcast the match there, which is not RSNs, which isn't for people who care about cricket? But so I think the goal is, from a business perspective, we're usually going to be one of the more competitive buyers of cricket rights because we have a large subscriber base. People pay for watching it. We've developed an advertising ecosystem, so we can afford buying rights. But what's that? The U.S. won.
Oh, fantastic!
I should just keep talking because I'm clearly good luck. The U.S. won the Super Over.
At the last minute, you
They
let
won
us
the
down.
Super Over. Yeah, that was amazing.
That's fantastic.
We're getting people back into
Everybody's
the room,
coming
though,
back now.
Come on in.
It's like, everybody's welcome back.
welcome
Don't
you
hide
back.
away.
Come on
It's
in with
okay.
big
Welcome
smiles.
back,
Thank
guys.
you. So I think our big mission and
It's
goal
not over
now,
again. I'm Gerrit.
I'm Amy.
I'm Satyan.
And
we
I'm
can start
Claire.
the panel all over, but no. Our big mission today is to think about, okay, the people who love cricket, we're pretty good at reaching them. We're always working to do better for them. But how do we get more people interested in the game? And the local experiential elements of you guys hosting the World Cup here, MLC building local matches, we're trying to figure out how to do sampling and exposure and broader audiences as well. But we think all of this over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years really can contribute to cricket, which is the second biggest sport in the world, having a bigger footprint in America.
Now, obviously, you've all faced different challenges along the way. I'd love to share some of your learnings from the challenges that you've faced, because I'm sure we're tripping over them as we speak. Gerrit?
Biggest challenge? Biggest challenge is creating fandom, creating fans. Most sports are inherently tribal, right? So you grow up into it because of the city you live in, because of the family you live in. So if you're 3 generations New York and your family has been watching football, you'll probably judge Giants if there's not another reason for it. You don't have that internationally. So the relevance play is usually missing. You don't have a natural connectivity. You probably didn't play it. You probably didn't grow up with anyone knowing about it, loving it, following it, watching it, attending it. There were probably no games available. A lot of times for us, it's about time zones, right? So all of Europe, you kind of cut off especially the good games. So how do you build fandom? It's a very, very different story than what you do natively in the US. And I would just assume cricket is not any different, right? So kind of you grow up with it. So for us, is we're thinking about how do we create fandom through the sport and the interest. Participation is one element of it. But also how do you create relevance maybe so other cultural elements that don't actually start with the sport. Could be the spectacle of sport and entertainment. So, American football for the rest of the world is very much an entertainment spectacle, very different to soccer, right? While soccer is the #1 sport in most countries in the world, it is inherently a very different experience going and watching a soccer game than if you ever watch an American football game. So the feedback we are getting is when we come to town or into a country is we've never seen anything like it, right? It's twice as long, 3 hours long. You come 2 hours earlier, you stay another hour. It's a full day. It's a very different experience, and that's what people take away, and that's what they associate with the game. So for us, we think every day about how can we create relevance so that we can create more fans who then give us a chance to explain it, because part of it is awareness, but then it's education. What's the game about? Why should I care? Etc. So I would take that as a starting point, and then there's a million other challenges that kind of come with that.
I'll just add to it, and I won't go too deep because the getting a ball in a kid's hand in school and when they're young is really the key. Having a player that they can admire and watch, the key.
Aaron Jones.
Right, Aaron Jones, my new favorite. What I think is new, at least for us, is our game tonight will be in 215 countries and 60 languages. Great, right? So some might say, great, thumbs up. The problem with that is localization as well. So that has been a challenge because at some point, if someone's really a fan, they want to watch someone they can relate to comment on the game, or they want to see fans from their country involved or players from their country speaking to them. And so we've spent a lot of time. We now have, I think, it's 65 localized social media sites for the NBA, but that's not enough. I think AI has helped us a lot with translations, with highlights, all of those things to make it localized and customized, but we're not all the way there yet, and there's a ton of potential there.
Amy, when are we getting an Indian player in the NBA?
We're working on it. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of our biggest investments for grassroots basketball and academies, but yes, we'd love one.
Your challenges?
Our challenges are obviously different. They're exporting sports from America. We're, in some sense, importing. I think the biggest challenge for cricket, to be honest, is that for people who don't know it, their first reaction is, isn't that 5-day game? And I think the reality is cricket's formats have changed so much. MLC is very centered on T20. I think many people in this room would say that the evolution of the game from like a commercial perspective is definitely evolving towards the shorter formats. But for the person who doesn't know it, they're like, isn't that the 5-day version of baseball? And I think both of those are hard. Whereas I think the goal for American cricket is to be, we're kind of like a higher pace, more fun version of baseball rather than it being the multi-day version. I mean, if you have to make a parallel, I think. But I think that's the challenge that we have to figure out in America.
Yeah, and I think we've got very adept over the last couple of years at explaining cricket in relation to baseball. Yeah. And then all of a sudden everyone gets it, in terms of pitches and everything like that. So, and it's also, we've had to do some shifts in how we communicate to the American fan. And you mentioned there the language piece, but have you had to, in those markets?
But I have to say, Claire, one of the most fun things happening right now on social media is there's a bunch of people who don't know cricket who are like, show me a fielder like this. And they show a highlight clip of a baseball player making an amazing catch. And then all of these, hardcore cricket fans that are like, how about this, how about this, how about this? And there's a little bit of this competitiveness about which is more of an athletic sport between cricket and baseball. And I think that's actually really fun and good for the game.
Yeah, and we've been doing a lot with the MLB on that as well. And it's the fact that cricket, we don't have gloves, or one person on the field has the gloves, and that's where it's sort of winning out on social media. But that shift in the way you communicate, the way you present. You mentioned earlier, Amy, about the games in Africa and a change in event presentation, and not just trying to export what you've always done here in the USA.
Yeah, and it was great for me to see firsthand. I mean, we just sell tickets like we normally do, and these teams are organizing drum sections, dancing sections. I actually came back, and one of the first things I told our game presentation people was like, you have to get the mop guy, the guy who comes out and mops the player's sweat, from Africa to NBA All-Star, because this kid was dancing and jumping and doing headstands, mopping the floor with his hair, which is a little much, but like you just take what's unique there and you want to take a best practice globally, but some of it is like it's what's there. I wanted to bring the drum sections to some of our team's games here, right? But it's not really a thing as much, at least at our games.
Yeah, I guess it's being open. It's not just the exporting, it's being open to the learning coming back into the core market.
Yeah, you want each country and each locale to make it their own in some way.
And Gerrit, how have you achieved that? I mean, I remember working for NFL UK probably about 10 years ago, and it was very much a curio product, whereas now it's a real established part of the UK sporting landscape. And the whole 2 hours before, hour afterwards, 3.5 hours in the stadium, that sort of thing it's a big day out, and it's important. And the UK sports fan has really adopted that way of doing things. How much did you have to work at exporting that experience out into the UK and getting UK fans to adopt it?
Yeah, I mean, again, the UK has had the benefit of, as you said, over 10 actually, many, many more years experience in kind of trying different things out with a strong affinity to the game to begin with. But even if you take the games, we only have 2 games. If you take Jacksonville, you have 3 games, right? You fill it, you have 200,000 people. We have 18 million fans in the UK, so you're not going to satisfy anyone really with that. And we've been doing this for a long time, so you very quickly have to think beyond the game, and you have to think beyond what can I do, not just for the rest of the season, because we have a very short season compared to soccer, etc. What do you do from a year-round activation perspective? How can you create an ongoing presence so that I care all year round? So the UK here is very, very different because the amateur level participation is much, much lower compared, for example, to Germany, right, where Germany has a very strong, they have several leagues, they have the ELF, they have a few other things that have nothing to do with the NFL, but you have a lot higher participation levels. And similar there, if we go with 1 game to Munich, that sounds great, but that's 80,000 people, 18 million fans in Germany. Again, you will be disappointing more than you will make happy. So for us, we're really trying to ingrain ourselves much more, whether that's participation, whether that's through content, whether it's understanding the relevance, to the point of like, what do people's perceived notion on the game is to begin with, right? Do they understand it? What's the level of education we have to provide? So there's actually a lot more that goes behind the scenes that we're doing on an ongoing basis that are maybe not as visible to the eye, and awareness and education have a lot to do with that. And maybe just to finish, but for us, Africa, for example, is something different, right? We don't have yet the fan base. We don't have the interest in watching, but it is an amazing region for us to find talent. It's out of all foreign-born players playing in the NFL, Africa has by far the highest percentage in foreign-born players. So next week, for example, we're doing our first talent ID camp in Nigeria through NFL Africa. And our NFL Africa looks very different than NBA Africa from a structure, investment, and otherwise perspective. So I think everyone is trying different things, and there's no answer. So if this year the new country for us is Brazil, Brazil will be, again, a very, very different kind of challenge about how we build fandom, how we show our representations there. So.
Thank you. I'd love to open the floor to some questions now, please. Have we got someone with microphones? We'll start over there. So anyone wanting tickets for USA India on the 12th here in New York, I suggest you form an orderly queue in front of Anurag at the end of this session.
No, firstly,
or just go to the website and buy them.
Well, firstly, great panel, wonderful
We're glad
discussion.
you were listening. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I know, with all the disruptions. But I think this could be a landmark. The USA winning, upsetting the runners-up, is quite amazing. Hopefully it's more than just a blip here in America, but that was great. Topic, Americanization of sport generally. You've got FIFA World Cup coming to Mexico, Canada, the US. You've got the Olympics. I worked on the bid with Wasserman Group coming to LA. Obviously, we've talked about F1 coming this way. One country has 3 races. No other country in the world where 90% of people might be fandom. Maybe only 20% of people even know what F1 is in America, but we've got 3 races. So 2-part question. Firstly, I think for Amy and Gerrit, really fascinated by your expansion internationally. It's been happening over years. I know a lot of the clubs, for example, on the NFL, have sponsored countries where they have academies and they do a lot of cross-pollination, and that's happening at a grassroots level. The NBA has been doing it for a long time. What do you think cricket can learn from what you're doing internationally? Because it feels like, here's the Americanization, T20 here in America, but it's still a minor blip. So then the second part of the question is to Satyan, is what could you be doing better to expand beyond your core base, which are, the endemic, diaspora? How do you get Americans excited about cricket? Well, what could be the learnings? And the only other last thing I'm dying to know is, would the NBA or the NFL consider in the next decade a franchise outside of America? You know, why wouldn't the Kroenke family, they should have a cricket franchise. The Kroenkes should be in cricket. And by the way, they should have a team in London or in Sao Paulo.
You mean NFL team or a cricket team?
Well, either. Both ways. Both ways.
This was well done question, first of all. We'll go with what can cricket learn just from the NBA and our... There's no silver bullet to this. We both talked about the three things. It's like you got to develop participation. You have to bring the NBA, NFL experience in some way. Maybe it's a live game, maybe it's not. And then you have to bring your games and your content, hopefully in a localized way. And that sometimes takes years to build, right? I told the story of how our first international broadcast was in 1981. It was Celtics-Lakers. It was in Italy. The Italian station broadcast it 13 days after the game was played. Like, that's where we've come with this. I think you have to be ready for those tipping points, though. Today's game, tipping point. You want to get U.S. fans excited about cricket? Boy, that's a pretty good opportunity that the U.S. team just had a huge upset. Now you just need that. How do you expose everyone to that? You know, we are very fortunate with Yao Ming in China and some of our we've had 6 straight MVPs internationally. And so all of that, it goes back to that grassroots development and everything, but it takes a lot of time. And you have to be patient, you have to prioritize, because getting balls in kids' hands is resource intensive.
Yeah, maybe agree with all of this. You need a certain amount of patience, and there needs to be a certain willingness to try things. Usually in these conversations, the first thing is like, well, it costs all so much money. It's the resource. And it does cost some money, and you have to think about it. But if you think, and you expect some kind of return, but there needs to be a certain level of patience. If you think about the total revenue of the league here domestically versus what we make internationally, you sometimes wonder, is it worth the effort, right? But the way we're looking at it is truly from a long-term growth perspective in participation, in fandom, everything else. And along the way, just literally trying and see what sticks. That takes not just the patient, but also the collective support. Like, especially for us, it is not just what the league wants, what the ownership wants, right? And that means a constant level of education, which has evolved significantly. I can't fully speak to it because I only joined recently, but from what I hear, versus 10 years ago, right? The interest, the leaning in of ownership, trying to understand the markets better. We're benefiting actually a little bit from exactly what you're describing. We do have a significant share of owners who also already own either Premier League clubs or they're vested into other endeavors abroad. So we now have a much more globally aware ownership group that leans in and goes like, well, how about this? How about that market? How about that sport? How about those infrastructures? So that's the benefit a little bit of it, but it takes still a lot of education. We meet collectively with ownership 8 times a year in person, right? And it's a topic every single time, right? So I can only kind of like talk a lot, explore a lot, kind of give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Don't point fingers if things don't work. Move on, try the next thing. That's easier said than done, especially in a world with, let's say, big egos, right? Where people feel hurt if they don't win all the time. So that's a big part of it that I would kind of say anyone, not just cricket, anyone who wants to try something in a market that's not native to them.
I want to just think to add, I think it's very important to give teams incentives to grow their brands globally. I think the NFL and the NBA are both doing that in different ways, right? Theirs is localized and teams making big bets in certain markets. Ours is through partnerships and marketing and giving them a little more bandwidth to go. But without that, you don't have everyone's incentives aligned, and you never know what teams. For example, the number of Mavericks fans we have in Slovenia now is ridiculous. We have Luka Doncic playing tonight. You can't line all those things up all the time. So you have to just be prepared and have everyone in your ecosystem have the same incentives.
I think the question to us is fair, and frankly, it's the question I think about the most right now, which is how do we both run a business that's centered on the audience that already loves cricket while playing a meaningful role in growing it? The 2 solutions we've come up with thus far, one is that be very aggressive as much as we can be to sample the product out. So thinking about how to get some of the matches either free to air or more accessible, trying to get clips of matches and things like that more widely distributed. And in theory, it supports our business because as more people like cricket, they'll subscribe. But that's not really it. It's just we want to get to more people. And how do we get more people to see it? So like while I was up here after the US won, the question we're wondering is how do we get the highlights of this match everywhere, right? Not just on South Asian outlets and cricket outlets, but beyond that. These are questions that we think about. The other side of it, I think, which is part of the reason we're the sort of founding broadcaster and partner with Major League Cricket, is that the best way to grow a game is to experience it, I think. And so, there are a couple stories that we've seen. Like, one is the amount of people who've come to me saying, I grew up, I loved cricket, I wanted my kids to watch it, and they just didn't care because they wanted to watch basketball or football or some other lame sport like that. But because they couldn't show it, right? At best, it was wake up at 6 a.m. and watch it, or some weird time zone. But to say I can take my kids to a game, and Major League Cricket sells 2+ like family pack tickets, so it encourages you to bring your family. I think those kinds of experiences are really impactful in growing the sport, and that's why we, wherever we can, we're trying to get more people to see the game while still keeping the business that we kind of have, which is where the subscribers, the people who love it already subscribe to it. We're just trying to find that balance between those two, I think.
May I add one additional point to the question that was just, and because I think it's very, very important, and that's partnerships, local partnerships. As we're looking at more and more markets, there's not a single market we go into without a very strong local partnership. That can be on a city, municipality level, regional level, with the stadium that we are partnering with. So we have a very, very good long-term partnership with Spurs in London, Bayern Munich in Germany, Real Madrid in Spain. We're now starting to work much deeper, going into Sao Paulo this year for the first time with Sao Paulo government as well as the Corinthians. Understanding the market and having people that you can really rely on who have their own benefit in being in this relationship helps so much. If you're trying to figure this out by yourself, it's really, really hard. So engage even just this exchange, it's like we're learning something, you're learning something. You can't engage enough in that kind of thing. Don't try to go it alone, you will fail.
Great. I think that's our time up now, unfortunately, because I'm sure we've got loads more questions, but the guys are all staying around. So Amy, Gerrit, Satyan, thank you so much for your time.
Claire.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.